Welcome back everybody. Now it's starting to warm up and now is a really good opportunity to give your barbecue a really good spring clean so it's ready for the summer months. Now quite a few of us will have a Weber barbecue, so I thought this would be a really good opportunity to make a video and go through a bit of a deep clean and some of the rejuvenation processes you can do on these barbecues to get them working really well and keep them in tip-top shape. So come along as we show you how. Now those that have been following our channel for quite some time will note that we've been using these butane cookers for the past 2 or so years since we've had the Jayco journey. Previous to that, we actually had a 2-burner gasmate barbecue, very similar to the Weber Q. However, it wouldn't fit through the door. So I swapped over to these because they're extremely compact and they work incredibly well. However, they do have a few compromises. And I've been contemplating getting a little Weber Q because we're always carrying gas. And we've got a few trips coming up where this would be really helpful rather than carrying a whole heap of butane canisters around with us. And what I discovered when I started hunting around, because I didn't want to buy a new one, I wanted to save a bit of money and experiment with a second-hand one just to see if we like it, is that there's quite a few refurbished ones on the market. And just like a used car, I didn't really want to buy a refurbished one because you didn't really know how it was looked after in the past. So I actually found this Weber Q here, which was a really neat example and hadn't been used all that much. And it came with a fair few extras that someone has already spent the money on. But it was a really good tester to see if the Weber Q barbecues would actually work for us, both camping and here at home. Now those that know me will understand that things around here typically snowball when I get into a train of thought. I'll just keep hunting until I find exactly what I want. I didn't find exactly what I wanted with this particular BBQ, but this will be perfect for camping. But what I did find was another Weber Q. So now we have 2. And what this second one will do is actually replace our larger 6-burner barbecue we've got over here. And the next video will be actually installing a pretty budget outdoor kitchen to accommodate this Weber Q, the pizza oven you see behind us, and tidy this whole mess that we've got along the back wall here to make a really nice outdoor kitchen and cooking area for the summer months. We're hosting Christmas here, so that sort of spurred me on, and I've obviously done a fair bit of marketplace shopping. Now this one I got for just over $200 as well, so I'm all in with both these barbecues for under the price of a brand new BBQ anyhow. So it actually works pretty well, and it was a good way to sell it to Michelle because she wasn't too impressed when the second one turned up. But that's a bit of a backstory, but let's get into this while we clean both of the barbecues up, because I think they'll come out looking really well, and I think you'll learn a lot of tips and tricks from the consolidated research I've been doing over the past few months. If we open this up, it's actually, as you can see, not terrible inside. It's just been used for a family while they've been out camping. It comes with the side tables that I don't really want, but we'll give them a bit of a clean up as well. And it's just got the standard 2 grill plates inside. The good thing about these is that they're basically a Meccano set. Everything comes apart so you can service them. So really there's no excuse to do this every now and again, but let's get into it and I'll show you how quick and easy it really is. And now you'll see through the episode how well this Weber Q came out, but I just thought I'd add in, if you're new to the channel, I break my videos up into chapters. So every little step that we go through will be broken up into its individual chapter so you can skip through. If you don't want to see the painting process and you just want to see how it all turns out once it's all clean, you can skip past the painting and go straight to the end if that's what you need to do, depending on what you're doing with the rejuvenation of your particular Weber barbecue. I also list all the products in the description below. So I've got links to everything that I've used in this video and pretty much all my videos. So it makes it really easy to go through and find what you need for your particular project. But I like to include all the tips and tricks to help everyone out there. So this is a little sneak peek on how the Weber Q turned out. Our BBQ I've kept pretty much factory looking, but I've actually done quite the rejuvenation inside the shell. So you'll be really interested in how both these barbecues turn out. Let's get back into it. Now to pull apart these Weber barbecues is incredibly easy. I'm going to fully break down these barbecues so I can give them a full clean so they're all ready for us to use. And I know that they're all okay. I can service everything and make sure everything's all nicey nice. So it'll be up to you on how far you pull them down. But obviously the first part is to obviously remove the lid. It's incredibly easy. You've got these 2 pins on either side. You simply remove the R-clips, which releases the pin. Get a little container or a Ziploc bag that you can put all your hardware into. Plop them in there so you don't lose them. And the lid simply lifts off like so, so you can give it a really good clean inside and out and get it all ready. The next step I'm going to do is remove this handle and the thermostat, and you'll see inside the lid there's simply 2 Phillips head screws just here and a wing nut to remove the thermostat. So we'll pull all that apart so we're not damaging any of the plastics or anything like that while we're giving it a clean. And in the case of the BBQ, giving it a bit of a spruce up as well. Now that we've got the lid off, I would actually remove the burner because that will make it a lot easier to clean the inside lower portion of the barbecue itself. It's really easy to pull out. It's just simply got 1 3/8 bolt on this end where the igniter is, noting this is the back. So you simply get a 3/8 socket and it simply unbolts from the base of the barbecue. And then the burner itself simply slides out of the barbecue and releases like so. Put that to the side because we'll give this a bit of a wash later on. Now I'm going to remove the gas hose. You simply need a 3/4 spanner or a shifting spanner and it simply comes off. And one thing I'll note while we're here is that the previous owner actually lost the O-ring off the input that goes into the gas bottle and actually put thread tape around where this actually screws into the gas bottle. That's a bit of a no-no, doesn't really work. You can actually get these O-rings really easily from any barbecue place, BCF, anything like that, Bunnings, and replace these if they start cracking or they fall off and you lose them. You definitely want these on here because that's what seals into the port of the gas bottle. And obviously with the newer model gas bottles, they have a different assembly altogether. And I will note on the other end where the hose goes into the barbecue, you also don't need thread tape, but I know some people do like to use it. This is actually a compression fixing that actually goes on to the barb at the end of the gas fitting. And that actually is what actually seals this all together, the brass onto brass into the gas fitting where the control knob is for the barbecue itself. You can also test with some soapy water to make sure it's not leaking any gas or give it a bit of a smell, but you don't need thread tape really on any of these gas fittings. They should just bolt together, seal up and work perfectly fine. Now it's just a case of removing the ignition system. Now it depends on the age of your barbecue and what igniter you have. Some will have the manual piezo igniter. That's pretty easy to remove and Weber's got a real simple video on that. In our case, the on and off button simply turns just like so, and that releases the button with the battery. So if you ever need to replace the battery or your igniter's not working, that's how you do it. You just turn it anti-clockwise, it comes out, you replace the battery, and it should really work. It's a good idea to replace this battery while you're doing the refurb. That way you know it's all ready for another few years use as well. So there's a lot of little steps we'll do through here where you can add bits and pieces on as part of servicing the barbecue while you're cleaning it all up and getting it ready for summer. The next step is to remove the rest of the module from behind the assembly. I just had a look at a Weber video as well. You just need a flathead screwdriver. You put it in the top and gently release the tab. You do the same on the bottom where the little lightning bolt is. And the assembly removes from the rear of the frame itself. Now we want to remove the igniter module and the igniter that sits inside the barbecue itself. It's just a simple case of releasing these 2 wires from the module assembly. Simply pull them out, put this to the side, and then I found removing the white wire completely allows you to pull the black through and you can release the igniter from inside the barbecue itself. This gives a really good opportunity to clean up all the mounting plates, everything like that, so it's all ready to assemble once we've got it all cleaned up. With that off to the side, the next part is to actually start disassembling this. And again, it depends on how far you want to go, but I'm actually going to pull it all down because it's incredibly easy to do. It's just like a Meccano set. And just like the grill plates, it's a good idea to remove the drip tray, so it's nice and easy to pull everything apart. And so to disassemble this frame and remove the bottom portion of the barbecue, you simply have 8 bolts you need to remove. You have 2 essentially on either end, both on the front and the back. And you need a T30 Torx bit to actually get into the head of the bolts. They also have a slot for a flat blade screwdriver, but something like this is really easy to use. You simply start removing all the bolts and it comes apart in a matter of minutes. So let me get this done and I'll show you what the inside looks like. Now I would do the top 4 first. That way you can release the handles from the frames. They come out just like this. And then you can go around and release the bottom 4 bolts, which will release the bottom of the barbecue itself. And with the last bolt out, it'll all pull apart. Now you'll notice there's a few little spaces that sit in between the bottom of the frame and the bottom of the barbecue. Make sure you don't lose them because you'll need them when you put it all back together. But it should all generally just fall apart. And then here are these little round bushes that actually sit into the frame and separate the tub of the barbecue from the frame itself. And it's all nicely disassembled. So you'll see here, this is really black and gnarly. So I think this will be really, really good to clean up. And I'll show you how we go about that really, really soon. Now we're going to soak all these plastics in the laundry tub, give them all a bit of a scrub and make sure they're all nice and ready to go back on. Now it's up to you if you want to remove this metal ring that the hose secures onto, that goes onto your gas bottle. But one thing I will remove is actually the turn knob controller that the gas port goes into. And you simply have 2 Phillips head screws here that you can take off. That will release this whole assembly and we can give the legs a really good wash in the tub, give them a bit of a treatment and it's ready to go all back together. And just like that, everything's disassembled because obviously I had 2 to do. The second one took literally 3 or 4 minutes because I'd already been through and done it before and I wasn't filming anything. So that made it incredibly quick and easy to do. So in my opinion, it's not a bad idea to strip these down, give them a full clean because it really doesn't take that long. You can quickly wash them up, put it all back together and it's all nicey nice. The one thing I thought I'd note while we're here is obviously if you've got the fold out shells, they come out when you release the handles on the top. So the 4 top bolts or the 2 on either side will release the shells. You can give them all a clean down. But for now, I'll put this back. We need to get on to the cleaning process, which should be really, really interesting for everyone that's trying to restore their barbecues or at least give them a freshen up so that they're not all caked in oil. I'm actually going to do this tomorrow because I've got to take Sam, our youngest son, to his Year 6 formal in our VK Commodore. So I spent the last few days trying to get it running, all back together, registered and ready to go. So I'm done for the day, but I'll see you tomorrow. And it's the next day and whew, is it hot. So this is actually probably perfect weather to be doing this because it'll actually soften up all the fat that we've got sitting inside our Weber barbecues and actually make it a little bit easier to clean. And you'll see that I've actually put some cardboard down onto the table here. You could use a tarp, some builder's plastic, anything like that. And to be honest, I probably should have done that yesterday, but I got away with it. I didn't make too much of a mess. But at this point where we're starting to get into the real nitty gritty, if you're doing it on a table, any surface really, you want to protect that so you're not getting oil and fat everywhere. Because to start off with, we're going to wipe everything down and get rid of as much of that residual fat as we can. So when we spray the cleaners and the degreasers on it, it can really get in and break down the stuff that's stuck onto the surface of the barbecue itself. So here I've got a whole variety of different things. I don't intend on using all of them, but there's a few backups here just in case. I want to start nice and gentle and work our way up if we need to. You can see on our BBQ shell that someone's actually gone at that with a wire brush. And if you start looking at the refurbished ones on Marketplace, stuff like that, you'll see quite a few actually hit them with a wire brush or a wire wheel on a grinder or a drill. Now I've got that as a backup, but I want to try a few other things out first. So what do we have? Well, firstly, we've got our cleaning agents. So we've got some simple dishwashing liquid here. And really, I'm going to use this to clean all the internal components, such as our cooking surfaces, so our grills, our plastics and stuff like that. So we'll use this in the laundry tub and we'll do a real thorough cleaning down of everything in there. Now you could also use this to clean down the barbecue. It's just going to be a little bit harder. And that's where something like the actual Weber barbecue cleaner comes into play. Now I've been using this a little bit on our BBQ and it works incredibly well. I'm actually really, really impressed. Now the interesting thing here is they say you shouldn't spray this on your cooking surfaces. So definitely don't use this on your grills and stuff like that, but you can use it on the inside and outside of the shell and it works incredibly well. Now my plan with this is actually to use this on the Weber Q that we've just bought because it doesn't have that real thick fat build-up on it. I want to see how this works just as a day-to-day or month-to-month sort of maintenance item on your Weber barbecue. And then I'm going to use something a little bit more aggressive that quite a few recommend to actually clean the BBQ that has a bit more of a build-up. And I've done that intentionally so I could actually show the two different methodologies. So I've also got the Selleys oven cleaner. Now a lot in the different Weber groups actually recommend this. It's in the blue can, which gets referenced quite a lot. And we're going to use this as an aggressive cleaner to break down all that built up charred tarnish, fat, and everything else on the inside of our BBQ. I want to see how this works, and we can do the side-by-side comparison. Now the important thing with all these cleaners, and this is what I do for work as well, we do a lot of bathroom restorations, tile cleaning, stuff like that, is you want to let the cleaning product dwell on the surface for as long as you possibly can. So what I've actually done, and they're in here behind me, sitting out in the sun, because it is pretty hot, is I've actually sat the shells out in the sun to warm them up a little bit, and that'll start softening all the fats up. It's a little bit different to doing a floor, but the methodology is kind of the same with everything that you're dealing with caked and sort of baked on dirt that you need to kind of release from the surface and then clean it back off. So in our case, with the Weber cleaner, they say don't leave it on the surface of the barbecue for any longer than 6 hours. Now I would say that with the outside shells, you definitely don't want to leave it there too long, because it's obviously a slightly caustic and aggressive cleaner. Now the oven cleaner, it's going to be harsher again. So if you're looking at maintaining the external appearance of your barbecue and you're not going to that extra step that we're going to do in this video, which is actually painting the outer shell, you don't want to leave it on there too long. Just leave it on there for the 5 to 10 minutes it says, and you can easily wipe it off with a microfiber cloth. So that takes me on to the other thing that we're doing is all the cloths, scrubbers and stuff like that. So I've got a whole pile of just basic microfiber cloths. You can buy these from Bunnings, any of your auto parts stores, stuff like that. These are just cheap microfibers. I've also got some paper towel. I use paper towel quite a lot for everything. You can quickly wipe things out before you start your clean. So we'll actually use this to wipe out the inside of the BBQ where it's got that real thick buildup of oils and fats. Now the other thing you definitely need, and I probably should have worn these yesterday, but it wasn't too messy, is you're dealing with some harsh chemicals here. So you definitely want to have some rubber gloves, or these are nitrile gloves that I wear pretty much for everything these days, but definitely have some hand and skin protection. If you want, wear some long sleeves so you're not splashing any chemicals all over your skin. Now what you also want is something to scrub down the surface. Now something we've been using, I think Michelle actually started using this, and it has worked incredibly well, especially on the grills where you don't want to be too coarse on the porcelain finish that a lot of the newer grills have, is actually a little nail brush. And I find this really good because it'll get into all your little tight spaces. You can grip onto it. It's really easy to clean when it gets a bit of a build-up of grease and dirt in it, and it doesn't take up a great deal of room. You can obviously get other scrubbing brushes and stuff like that, but you want something you can scrub down the surface with without being too aggressive for the most part. Now from there, we're going to build it up and get a little bit more aggressive if we need a fair bit of help, which I think we will, because a lot of this will be caked on, particularly with that BBQ that we've got. So from Bunnings also, I've had these in the back of the van that I intended to trial on a few showers and stuff like that, are these 3 brush kits that you get from Ryobi. So I think I'll probably actually start with a real coarse brush, because I think this is what we'll need. And I want to try using some of these nylon brushes instead of the wire wheels, just to see how they work, because I don't want to go scratching up the surface, remembering these are aluminium shells. You don't want to be too aggressive on them if you don't need to. So we're going to start softly and work our way through, see where we end up. Now the other thing you might want to try is also some Scotch-Brite pads. So these are just your cleaning pads, again you get from Bunnings. These are really good, and you can obviously agitate up the surface, spray a little bit more cleaner on and let it dwell and soften that up, scrub it back off and keep on going like that. So it's all that process of dwell, agitating, spraying some more on, dwell, agitating and getting through all those layers of dirt that you get on the inside of something like a barbecue, an oven or anything like that. I'm going to do this over a whole day, and I know I'm jibber-jabbering a little bit too much at this point, but I just want to describe the process of what you want to go through to get the best product you possibly can. If you rush through it, which I know a lot of people do, it won't turn out nearly as well. You want everything to break down, and time is what you need for that to happen, with a little bit of agitation along the way. Now, if we need to get a little bit more aggressive, I've got a few other things here which might help out. The first is this. This is a brass brush. So you get this from the welding section in the tool sort of aisle inside Bunnings. You probably go to Toolies, Sydney Tools or anything like that. Because they're brass, they're actually quite soft. So you actually grind the bristles down rather than actually destroying the surface that you're working on. So brass, in my opinion, is a lot better than the steel brushes that we'll see later on in this little description I'm doing here. And if you can actually get a brass drill or grinder brush, I would definitely use the brass wire wheel over, say, a steel one. Now this is me experimenting a little bit, but I've also got one of these nylon filament brushes. So again, this goes onto your drill. I haven't actually got grinder attachments for this because I don't think I need to go that aggressive. Now these nylon brushes are going to be not quite as coarse and aggressive as a steel wire brush, but they do work extremely well for stripping paint off and other little finishes such as silicons and stuff like that. So I really want to try this out and see how it works before we progress to a wire wheel if that's what we need to do. So lastly, we have the wire wheel. And again, I've just got a drill one and I've kept them around the 75mm. You can go smaller and larger in size, but I think this will be a lot more manageable inside a barbecue itself. If you go a really big wire wheel, it's going to be a little bit hard to move around. And again, it will actually change the speed that it's going around on the drill as well. I figure with a drill, you've got that variable button on it, so you can actually change the speed so you're not being too aggressive and too fast, and you can actually control and vary how it's actually stripping down, and more importantly, make sure it's not damaging that aluminium finish inside the barbecue itself. So this will be our last resort in my case, unless I have to go and get something more aggressive, but I really don't want to do that. On top of that, I've also got some Weber products here. So I've actually got the grill brush that I've just bought. I haven't actually used it yet, obviously, because it's in the packaging, but this is what you use to obviously maintain the grill surface. We probably won't use it as part of this video, but it's something if you haven't really got, you probably should have to get rid of that charcoal mess that you get, particularly if you're using marinades, which we do quite a lot, or you're roasting, you end up with a bit of a mess. Now, the one thing we will use in this video, which you definitely should have to maintain your Weber, and you could probably use another branded product, but again, this for me will actually work incredibly well, is this plastic scraper. Now you use this because it's got the profile on it to actually scrape out the lower shell of your Weber barbecue. So we're going to start with this straight away. I'm going to clear all this mess off and we're going to scrape down the BBQ because I want to get that top layer of gunk off it so we can actually let the cleaner get in and break down everything that's in behind. So we should end up with a really clean barbecue at the end of the day. Rightio, now I don't know how well you can see in here, but this is grubby as. So we definitely need to give it a scrape down. It's just a simple case of getting this scraper and running it all down the sides to get rid of the muck. Then we're going to use our paper towel just to scoop it all up, and you'll see that it all falls into the bottom hole. Now, if I was going to do this again, I would actually put the paper towel down first. That way all the little scrapings end up on the paper towel. You can just wrap it up and put it in the bin. So for now, I'm just going to pick it up, put it away. But that's essentially the initial scrape done on the inside of the BBQ that we've got here. I'm starting to actually see the surface underneath, so the build-up probably isn't dramatic in that sense, but there's still a fair bit of grime in here that we need to break down and get cleaned off. So let's take everything over to a little area where we can work in the backyard and give these a really good spray down, let them dwell and see how they come up. Now I'll mention here that you want to do it somewhere probably not on the grass because we're dealing with some pretty harsh chemicals here. I think once you actually wash these off into the grass, it's probably not going to do it all that good. So you want to find somewhere where you can do it and it doesn't matter if you damage it. Noting I've had this sitting out in the sun to warm it up, the other option is you can actually run your barbecue for a little while just to get a bit of temperature into the surfaces that you're going to clean down. You don't want to get it too hot obviously because that'll burn off the cleaner that you put in, but having some heat into the surface does obviously help soften up everything that's inside it. And that cleaner can then work into the oil buildup that you've got inside the barbecue itself. That's another little tip and trick that I thought of while I was cleaning this up. But definitely if you get some heat into the surfaces that you're cleaning, that'll make a really big difference as well. So we'll take it out, get it all set up, I'll spray them down, and then we'll see how they come up. Now ideally you do this in the shade, but I actually don't have anywhere other than grass that's in shade at the moment. So we're going to try it out in full sun and see how it goes. The only thing I mentioned about doing this in full sun, particularly when it's hot like this, is that your cleaner will tend to evaporate off the surface. So you might just need to reapply a few times. But I'm going to try it and see how it goes. If I need to, I do have an area on some concrete I can move this to. I'm just going to see how it goes for the first half an hour or so. But this is our Weber Q, so our larger one that isn't as tarnished up. And I'm actually going to use the Weber cleaner on it just to see how it goes. So it's a simple case of just spraying it on. And we're going to treat the inside surfaces first, and then we'll clean the outside surfaces just with the Weber cleaner on both barbecues. The insides are really where we want to do the aggressive clean. We're going to use the Weber cleaner to actually sort out the outsides without being too aggressive. So on this one, we'll be using the Selleys oven cleaner. It'll be more aggressive, but I'm interested to see the comparison between the two, particularly on the upper lids that aren't quite so tarnished. So I'll spray this on, and again, we'll leave it for half an hour. We'll come back and we'll see how it's going. Actually bought 2 cans of this just in case, but you can already tell the oven cleaner is going to do a better job with these hard, built-up, grubby sort of surfaces that we're dealing with. But again, I'm curious to see what the Weber cleaner will do, because that'll appeal to a lot of people that don't want to use any harsh chemicals or harsh cleaners such as these. So we're going to leave this now, see how it goes.
Many hours later.
Rightio, it's now been around about 4 hours. I actually did move these into the shade because I found it was just working a lot better. And I have actually sprayed the Weber Q barbecue that I was using the Weber cleaner with another time, halfway through, just to keep it nice and moist. And while it looks like it's dry, you can actually run your finger along and it generally comes off. So what I'm going to try with this lid here is the first step. So let's just try some hot soapy water. So I've just got some dishwashing liquid in some hot water here with the microfiber. I'm going to try wiping over a portion of this and see how it wipes off. As a backup, I've actually got that coarse brush on a Ryobi drill. We'll go over this and see how it's going. Now with all these processes, given that we're using corrosive cleaners, you want to make sure you neutralise and rinse off with fresh water. You don't want those cleaners continuing to eat into the aluminium, but I would say that that is impressive. So this is just the Weber cleaner, and given it wasn't heavily soiled, it's cleaned up pretty much absolutely everything on there. I haven't done any scrubbing or anything like that. So now let's bring over the base. I think I'll give it a bit of a go with the brush just to see what kind of difference that makes. We'll give it a rinse and see how that turned out. I've done a little bit of experimenting, and I think the brush, the hard bristle brush that comes on the Ryobi drill as a part of the kit, I think it will do a really good job. You can see where it started, pretty much just stripping it right off. The one thing I have noticed between the Weber cleaner and the oven cleaner, if we put the two side by side, as you can see here, is that the oven cleaner creates quite a thick skin around the outside or the area that you're trying to treat. Now what that will do is actually stop everything evaporating out of it and let it really work into those oils and fats and the carbon buildup that's in the base of these barbecues. So what I'll do now is I'll just keep on going with this. I'll strip it all the way back and then we'll see how it comes up. I think there'll be a little touch up required here and there, but this should get it pretty well all stripped back and looking nearly brand new, I would say. Now, given we're working with power tools and there's things flicking up everywhere, make sure you put some eye protection on. I'm just going to put my sunnies on. It's still really hot and bright out here, but if you just wear some clear goggles, that'll save anything flicking up and into your eyes. Given this is a caustic material, you definitely don't want that in your eyes. I got some epoxy in my eyes at work the other day and it was terrible. You just don't want to go through that. So anyway, that's my little WHS tip and trick. Make sure you wear your eye protection, you got your gloves on. Probably should have something on your sleeves because this will make a fairly big mess, but it's way too hot out here to do that today. I'm going to strip this down and we'll see where we're at. I might even also spray a little bit more of this cleaner around if I just need to lubricate it up. I'm going to try to leave it how it is for now and we'll see how we go. And wow, how good did that come up? Now I made a bit of a mess. I had to turn the camera off because stuff was going everywhere and you're on a brand new lens. So I didn't want to necessarily wreck that, but holy moly, that made a really big difference. There's still a few little areas to clean up, but that stiff bristle brush on the drill made a really big difference. And it just goes to show that you don't need to go to the extremes. Start softly and work your way up and work out what you actually need to strip these down, clean them up to whatever you want. I need to do a few little touch-ups on this, but I think for most people, this would be perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do now, before we bring over the BBQ that's had the oven cleaner on it, is I've tried really hard to keep this bit of egg and stuff like that on it. So I'm going to give this a quick spray, give it a wipe down, and that should pretty much restore the outside of this base without too many dramas at all. Well, it's been around about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll just quickly change the battery in the camera. I've come back out and I've just gave the front section a bit more of a spray. That's where we had the egg hanging down. I just want to make sure that it dissolves all of that. Now it's just a case of getting a microfiber and wiping over it. You can obviously use some hot soapy water as well. I'm going to use the microfiber first, and then if I need to, I can just touch it up with some hot soapy water afterwards. But you simply just wipe it off now. It's pretty cool stuff, this Weber cleaner. I've been pretty impressed by it, to be honest. I can see a stain down through here, so that hasn't come out yet. Might have to give it a bit more of a scrub, but I'll be back with you in a few minutes and show you how it all came up. And it came up okay. I wouldn't say it's perfect. The problem with this base is that it's being used for camping. So it obviously had a lot of egg that's been cracked on the side of it, that's run down, it hasn't been cleaned off. That's probably the worst thing you could possibly do because, as you know, egg will pretty much eat into anything. And what's happened is it has actually started eating into the finish. I don't know if you can see it on the camera here. Just here, it's sort of eaten through the powder coat or the finish that they put on the bottom of these bases. And you can see that there's still some what looks like runs that are running down. Now I did hit them with a bit of a Scotch-Brite pad just to see if I could clean it up a little bit more. And to be honest, it didn't make that much of a difference. You can see that's probably the same. That's egg as well. That's sort of etched itself into the surface of this particular base. Now, given we are actually painting the top of it, I didn't want to paint the base, but we might just touch that up as part of the process. That way it's all fully refurbished and it's all nicey nice. Now, the other problem I've got is, as you can see, the weather is coming through and you can probably hear it on the microphone. So we need to get this other BBQ done pretty quickly. So let's bring that over and I want to see how the oven cleaners worked as opposed to the Weber cleaner that we've used on this one. The one thing to point out is obviously the Weber cleaner is around twice or 3 times as expensive as an oven cleaner. And I'm on my second bottle now, but I probably used half a bottle just in maintaining the Weber before we pulled it all down. For $18 or $19 that you buy these for, you can probably get 3 cans of oven cleaner. So let's bring that over, we'll clean it up and see what the difference is between these two. Can you really notice? But remember, there is a price difference and it probably will be a lot easier to clean off because the oven cleaner will have done a much better job in my opinion. But we'll find out in the next few minutes. Just like the Weber cleaner, you can actually wipe it off. And I'm going to be really curious as to whether or not the finish inside here is going to be any better or worse than with the Weber cleaner. The one thing I will note is there was a lot more tarnish inside this particular lid. So let's just wipe it down the same as what we did with the larger lid and see what kind of difference it makes. It might actually clean up okay, but I've been doing a lot of smoking in here and I have a feeling it's probably at least stained the sides of it. So there might be a little bit of extra work we need to do. Might be that I soak it again overnight. Let's just see how we go. But I really want to get onto that base as well. And noting that this weather's changing, I probably won't show you too much, but we'll start the process and see how it comes up. That's actually not too bad. It might be that we need to go around with that coarse brush just on the outsides or around the perimeter where it really builds up that bit of that charred sort of look that it gets and see how that goes. But so far, again, we haven't used a pressure washer, we haven't used any wire wheels or anything like that, so I think we're winning. But as far as the oven cleaner versus the Weber cleaner, so far I don't really notice too much of a difference, to be honest. So now we're getting some interesting results. It's not quite as good as the other lid, but remember, this is the one that had a lot of that tarnish build-up that you could see someone had already, or the previous owner, had already sort of tried to scratch off with a wire brush. So I don't know exactly how long a lot of this tarnish has been underneath, but there's still remnants in here. If I spin it around, you can sort of see there's still quite a bit around the outsides, I would say. So this is a perfect candidate to actually touch up with something else, which we'll do tomorrow morning. I'll leave this overnight, and I don't think it's really grease, it's just sort of stuck in the casting of the aluminium itself. Not terrible, I wouldn't say, and I think for most people, look, that's fully serviceable, it's ready to go. It's going to get dirty again anyway, but for me, I'd like to show how far you can actually go. And I think the other lid's in fairly good condition. We don't really want to mess that up. So how about we have a crack at this one? That's the advantage as I'm going through this, because I tend to have duplicates of everything, is that I can try different things out and I can show you what works, what doesn't work. So far we've taken that soft approach, and now we're starting to find a few roadblocks where we might want to do a little bit more. So if you've got a heavily tarnished barbecue, then these next few steps might be handy for you. If you've got a, just a regular lightly soiled barbecue, then what we've done so far would probably work in most instances. So we'll go on to the next lot of refurbishment steps and see what happens. Now I'm really curious about the base now, because it was really, really grubby and heavily tarnished. So let's bring that over, see what happens. I think I'll definitely have to hit it with that brush. So we'll do the same process. We'll give it a rinse off, see what it looks like. But I think we'll have to go through a few more steps to refurbish the BBQ. One thing I'll note with the drill is you'll notice that it flicks in one direction and throws it back in the other. So work your way around in the methodology that is actually flicking the material back down into the barbecue rather than flicking it all over yourself. That'll make life a lot easier. But I'll get this done. I think we're going to have to hit it with a wire brush, or we'll try that red brush and see how it goes. But you can see there's a fair bit in there. So we'll see how we go. And well, it didn't actually come up as bad as I expected. Now I've done a little bit of extra work with this to get it to this point, and I think it still needs another few goes at it, to be honest. So I've got a few things that I'm going to look at. But how I got to this point is that I did actually swap over and start using this red nylon brush. It did a fairly good job just to sort of work through and sort of start cutting into the layers that we had in the bottom of this particular pan, but it actually did a fairly good job. So I don't want to quite go that far yet, because I also did a bit of a test on this lid. So I went down through here, and you can see what starts happening when you start using wire brushes and everything like that. You start getting this real scratchy sort of glossy finish, I guess, which, I mean, that's probably where we're going to end up with this particular barbecue. And then the next step that you would have seen was that I actually coated it with oven cleaner again. I probably didn't leave it on there for long enough, but I left it on there for around 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. Hit it with a Scotch-Brite pad just to start, again, trying to break it down. And every time you see another layer coming off, I then went over this with the pressure washer. So this is the first one we've done with a pressure washer, and it did start cleaning it up. It's a bit of trial and error from here. This is the experiment, and that's why I like making these videos, because you're coming along with me as we're trialing all these processes out. I do the research, I come across what different people are doing, and then I test them to see if they're really going to work and how much effort actually goes into that. So let me get back onto this. I'm gonna have a bit more of a play around, and I'll see you in the morning.
The next day.
So as you can see behind me here, it's actually been an interesting few days. I did actually soak the BBQ in oven cleaner overnight, and it came up okay, but it wasn't fantastic. So I took the plunge and actually hit it with the wire wheel. And this is essentially how they come up. So they do look a lot more impressive. They've got a lot more of a shine inside them. There's still a few marks here and there. I wasn't going crazy with it, but it did actually come up looking incredibly well. Now the issue I came across when I left the oven cleaner on overnight was that it actually darkened up the aluminium quite a lot. And while it did actually clean up quite well, it made it a lot easier to clean up those last little bits of carbon here and there. It wasn't actually the look that I was going for. And the main issue was with the base. So if I pick up the base, you can see this here looks a lot better than what it was. So this is the base that was really heavily tarnished with a lot of carbon buildup. This has actually come up quite well. And again, I haven't gone crazy. I left this bit here where the burner sits in, and a few other little bits and pieces here and there, but I just wanted to see how it came up. Now to achieve this only took a few hours, but I essentially just clamped it to the table here, which did make a bit of a mess, but you can blow it all away, and work my way around the inside of the base to start off with, just to see how it would come up. You see here with the imagery from halfway through that I basically just started at the bottom, worked my way around, and then I eventually flipped it up the other way and finished it all off. So really, if this is the look you're going for, it comes up incredibly well. especially when you compare it to our other base here, which is our BBQ that I've cleaned just with the Weber cleaner. Noting this wasn't terribly dirty to start off with, you can sort of see in a way how the aluminium is porous. So it's sort of got little dots everywhere and stains and bits and pieces, and you won't actually get rid of all that until you hit it with the wire wheel. And it's been something I've been trying to avoid, but I thought for the purpose of this video, how about we give it a go, just so that I can sort of let you know how the process went, how hard it was, and in the end it wasn't all that hard at all. So what are my final thoughts with this portion of the process? Well, it really depends on how dirty your barbecue is when you start the cleaning process. The Weber cleaner, I think, works pretty well, but it is quite expensive for what it is. The oven cleaner does just a good job, maybe a little bit better, and it's way under half the price, and it does work really, really well. The fact that it makes that skin and traps the moisture underneath, it works into and breaks down all the tarnished carbon and grease buildup a lot better. I do think one of these coarse brushes on a drill does help a lot, and then just give it a pressure wash and be happy with how that really comes up. Now, if you're wanting to go the next level, like what we've done here with the BBQ, probably avoid this step with the red nylon brush. For me, that didn't really do as much as what the wire wheel did, and this is the result and what's left over the wire wheel after we did both the base and the lid of our BBQ. There's still a little bit left. It's still probably got another barbecue to go, and to be honest, this was the most efficient way of doing it. It took maybe 2 hours to do the base and the lid, and really that's the best result that you could possibly ever want. Noting that as soon as you start using these barbecues, they're going to tarnish up again, but it provides that nice clean finish that you can wipe it down pretty much after every cook. Get some of the barbecue wipes, they're incredibly good, or just keep going over it with your Weber barbecue cleaner and you'll have a fairly well maintained barbecue. And that is more important with the base. You want to pull the grill plates off and clean underneath that as often as you possibly can, particularly if you're cooking with a lot of marinades like what we do, you're smoking, or you're roasting with a lot of fats that might actually get down underneath, particularly if you're not using a pan or anything like that, or there's a risk of fats actually dripping and getting down underneath the barbecue. The more often you do it, the easier it's going to be to actually clean that and break down all the grease and marinades that collect on the bottom. And that can actually affect the performance of your burners. Particularly with the BBQs, where you've got the really small holes down around the bottom. I've actually already given these burners a bit of a clean. I sprayed them with the Weber cleaner. I soaked them in some hot water, I've given them a scrub, and I even tried some Jif with some steel wool to restore these back to their original condition. They've come up okay, and they're more than functional for the purpose that we're trying to do here. We're not trying to win any shows or anything like that. And one thing I did notice, and I've come across in a lot of my research, is that these holes are prone to clogging up. So once you clean these off, it's really important to actually go around with, say, a toothpick, a drill, or anything like that, and actually check each of the holes. So poke a toothpick or anything like that into the holes to clean them all out and make sure there's no blockages. Now with the larger barbecues, the holes are actually larger than what you get in the BBQs, so they're not as prone to block up. But if you are in an area that's coastal, or you're using your barbecue in a coastal area where you get a lot of corrosion and build up on these burners, you might actually have to hit them with a wire wheel, some steel wool or something like that, and it's really critical that you go through and open up all these holes so that your burners are working really, really efficiently. On the end, you'll notice there's a bit of a stainless steel gauze. Make sure you don't get anything caught up in that while you're giving it a bit of a clean, and most importantly, make sure you drain everything out, get all the debris out of the inside of these burners, so it's going to work efficiently and effectively once you've put this all back together. I'll just quickly touch on your grill plates. You obviously want to take them out, give them a really good soak, give them a bit of a clean with a wire brush that Weber provides, and then I actually use a Scotch-Brite pad to give them a real good scrub to make sure they're as clean as you can possibly get. Now the new models that have the porcelain coating on them, I try not to be too harsh on them because you don't want to go and destroy that coating. So I've just generally got as much off as I possibly can, noting that these will get dirty first time we use it down the track. But you want to keep these as clean as you possibly can, give them a wipe down, and they'll last you a very long time. Now if you've got the older grill plates, which are more the raw steel, you might want to actually hit them with a wire wheel just to clean them all up, and then give them a real good clean, then season them with some oil so that they're not rusting away when your barbecue's sitting still. Again, at the end of every cook, you should, while these are still warm, give them a bit of a clean, and in particular with the raw ones, put a bit of oil on them and that will stop them from rusting until next time you use it. So this all takes me on to the next step, which is cleaning all your plastics. So let me get this out of the way and I'll run through a bit of the process there, as well as some tips and tricks to refurbish the plastic and get it looking spick and span. And now the last part of the process, unless you're going the full hog and painting all the outsides, is to clean all the plastics up. Now I've just quickly gone and cleaned all these while I was doing everything else, and it was dead easy really. You just want to fill your laundry tub, your kitchen sink, a bucket, anything like that up with some hot soapy water. So all you need to use is some normal dishwashing liquid, and I like to use a nail brush, as I said before. These are really, really good because they're nice and soft, so they're not going to scratch up all the plastics, but you can still agitate the surface a little bit to get rid of any stubborn marks, grease, oil, or anything like that. And really it's just a case of soaking them, giving them a clean with a microfiber, maybe the nail brush, and then giving them a bit of a dry. And you'll notice that pretty much every component has all the webbing and a bit of an open area behind. A little tip and trick to actually help dry these out is to get a blower, or I've got one of these little jet fans. You simply just get it going, and it's a real quick and easy way to blow all the water out behind all the webs and junctions in all these plastic pieces. They have a number of different speeds, and they're a real handy compact little thing to have. But it just made drying these a little bit easier so I wasn't getting water and mess everywhere, because this is a bit of a messy process when you start cleaning 2 barbecues, the grills, and everything that goes with them. So I've been using that jet blower a little bit just to dry things off and speed the process up a little bit. Once your plastics are all cleaned, you still might notice some marks and discoloration on them. And here's where I want to go through some tips and tricks to help you out there. In our case, our plastics aren't too bad, but it's the lids where I've noticed a little bit of discoloring. So I'm going to treat all the plastics, but I'm going to use one of the lids in particular as a bit of an example of some of the processes you can go through to actually restore and rejuvenate these plastics. So this is the left-hand shelf of our Weber Q. They had this sticker on here that was starting to fade, peel, and it was looking a little bit tacky. So the first thing was to remove that, and that gave us the black plastic to work with. I don't know if you can actually see it in the video, but there's a fair few white marks, scuffs, and just general wear and tear on these particular plastics. The first is what you do to faded black plastics on cars and stuff like that, and that is to hit it with a heat gun. You actually run the heat gun over it, and that actually re-emulsifies the plastic and brings the colour back out. Now, in my opinion, this is a bit of an extreme remediation of the black plastics, because there's a lot of other things you can do to actually improve the appearance without affecting the makeup of the plastic and potentially damaging them, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So we'll take the more sensitive approach here and just see how it comes up. What you want to do is get some trim restorer. Same thing you would use on a car. So this is another alternative to using a heat gun. In our case, I've got some Meguiar's product here, but pretty much any of the trim restorers will work quite well. And with these, it's just a simple case of getting a microfiber cloth. You put a small amount of product onto the cloth, and then you just work it into the plastic. It's a real easy and effective solution for restoring the plastics. It now looks brand new, and it's ready to go on the barbecue. So in my case, I'm actually going to use this on all our plastics to give them a nice new finish before we put it all back together. Now with the other shelf, it used to have all the writing on the bottom here. So I did a bit of an experiment yesterday, which was removing this writing to see how it would come up. And I think most of us will have the issue where that writing has started to deteriorate and come off the actual plastic. So let me just cut to that clip. I'll show you how to remove that. And then I want to hit this with the trim restorer as well to see how it comes up. This portion here is the only bit that's in English. These are 2 different languages. So I just want to trial and see how easy it is to remove this writing. So far I've used straight acetone, which has done a job to a point. There's a little trick you can do, and we'll see if that makes it a little bit better. So what you want to do is get some mineral terps and then some acetone, which is essentially nail polish remover. Get a little plastic container or something to put it in. Make sure it's not going to dissolve with the chemicals that we're using. I'm going to put the acetone in, and you don't need that much. And then a bit of mineral terps over the top. Try not to make a big mess with it. And now what the mineral terps does is it mixes in with the acetone, and it stops the acetone flashing off. So that gives the acetone a little bit more time to actually work and dissolve the ink or the paint that's in the writing on these particular shells. I just want to test it and make sure it's not going to damage or mark the plastic at all, but it should make it a lot easier to actually, again, it's about the dwell time that it's got to dissolve and actually take this writing off. So now you just dip microfiber in and just dab it around. Again, initially just to start soaking the surface that we're trying to dissolve. So we want it to sit on there a little bit. We don't want it just evaporating given it's another really hot day. We're expecting it to be 34 degrees today. So I'm not really looking forward to that, but it's perfect weather for painting. So that is good. So I've just got this sitting here now and I want it just to start softening up the ink or the paint that they've used to put this labelling onto the plastic. So I'm just going to let this soak for a few minutes. Then we'll come through, try to get it off and see if we can fade it back enough that it's not really all that noticeable. This might be a solution for those that don't want to have the writing on there, or it's worn off and you just want to tidy it up a little bit. We'll see how we go. Another little tip and trick is actually to soak your microfiber cloth and leave it sitting on top. And again, that's going to trap all the moisture in there and let it work into the material that we're trying to remove. I've also gone over it quickly with the nail brush, again, because it's nice and soft. You can still agitate into the grain of this plastic without scratching it all up and causing too much damage. But it's coming off and it's working really well. So as you can see, that worked extremely well. You can just very slightly see it, but I do think once we do the plastic enhancement on this particular piece, it'll pretty much blend and fade away. But for now, I'm actually going to put some of this Meguiar's trim restorer on it and see how it comes up. You can hardly tell the writing was ever there. So again, this is a nice easy upgrade you can do. There's a little white mark here, which I think is actually from this rubbing on the lid, which has actually caused a few marks on the lid, which is why we're going to repaint it. But really, this was a simple and effective way of actually really improving the look of the barbecue and making it a lot easier to clean and maintain. Now that you've restored and actually enhanced the plastics, these will be a lot easier to clean. So now it's just a case of going over all the other plastics and then we can go through the process of putting this back together. But before we do that, I am going to paint the lid. So for anyone interested, I'm going to show you the process there. We'll start assembling all this, but you can always skip past that and we'll go on to the final assembly in just a few minutes. Now my BBQ shell actually is in really good condition. I don't know if you can see it here. It's got a really good shine, doesn't have any scuffs or marks on it. So I'm going to leave it exactly as is. But if we swap these around, my Weber Q lid has seen a fair bit of abuse through camping and being packed away and thrown into the back of the four-wheel drive, the camper and stuff like that with the previous owner. And because it's got these marks all over it, I can't actually clean them off. So that has actually made it the perfect candidate for those that want to be a little bit adventurous. So the next step here, if you want to go the full hog, is to actually paint the outside of your Weber barbecue. Now there's a few different paints that you can look into. I'm just going to use the White Knight Potbelly Black to make it a nice satin black finish. And to me, that will actually give a bit more of a factory look. Now there's a number of other colours in the White Knight range you get from Bunnings and they're high temperature rated. So you want to use a paint on these lids in particular that are rated for around about 500 degrees. Engine enamels might be okay, but most people will suggest a brake caliper paint would probably work just as well. Try not to use clears because the clears aren't as good, but you can get a lot of colours in the brake caliper paint as well as some of your heat-proof paints as well. So just find something that's up around, say above that 400 to up to 500 degree range, and it should last pretty well. Now, given that our shell is actually in fairly good condition, I'm just going to scuff it up. I'm not going to strip this bare like what some people would do. However, if the finish on the top of your barbecue or the base or whatever you're looking to paint is all blistered and it's flaking and it's coming off, I would actually strip it right back. Now, a lot of people will actually recommend you use a poly stripper, just like this. You put it on and that will soften the paint up. Now, a little tip I've got here, if you are paint stripping anything, is to put the paint stripper on, make sure you wear gloves because you don't want that getting on your skin, and then put some plastic over the top. So use a plastic drop sheet or something like that. You might be able to use Glad Wrap, but I've always just used a plastic drop sheet. So if you're stripping a bonnet on a car or something like that, you'll put this paint stripper on, put the drop sheet over the top, and that, again, lets it work into the surface that you're trying to strip rather than it actually evaporating and breathing off. So that'll make it work a lot better. It sort of traps the heat that's generated back into the surface that you're trying to strip. It makes it a lot better. What people generally do there is they'll then give it a pressure wash to remove the paint stripper that's actually removed the finish off the top of the shell. Then you'll have to go back over it, probably with a wire wheel. And that is where the wire wheels do come into play. But for me, it's just going to be a case of scuffing this up. You don't want to use anything too coarse that you put scratches all over the surface. So I'm going to start with a 400 grit sandpaper. And what you want to do is just dull up the surface. The one thing I will do, which I'll cover once we get into it, but I do want to paint this inside flange that runs around the inside of the lid. So we'll lift it up, and maybe it's just a case of just blending some paint in. If you look at any brand new Weber Q, they don't actually mask it from factory. You'll see the colour sort of just blends in to the inside of the lid. And I've been trying to get the cream colour off the inside here so that it's not quite so noticeable. But generally it should be pretty straightforward of literally getting the sandpaper and starting to scuff up the surface. Here I've got a little chip in the paint. I will actually go around that to feather it out. And it really shouldn't take that long to prep this ready for paint. And you want to pay particular attention to getting rid of the gloss finish around the emblems and stuff like that. So you want to get into all the little corners, but you don't want to take it too far back to bare metal if you're keeping it. You just want to make sure that you dull up all the surfaces that you're going to paint so that the new paint will actually bond and stick to the surface. And now we're going to quickly do the same with the base. Now, one thing I should say is I probably should have put gloves on given I've been dealing with the grease from the inside, but I'll just make sure I really prep it well. Now, the base actually, other than having those marks on it, does have some corrosion here and there. So the areas of corrosion you want to feather back to get rid of all of that because that'll come through in your paint work. But you want to get rid of all these little bubbling areas and stuff like that, where it's all starting to corrode a little bit with the aluminium underneath, just to make sure you get a really nice finish. In my opinion, you're going to focus on the front portion, which is over here. This is the back where the hinges come out. You want to make sure that is Mickey Mouse and probably down the sides. And remember, the frame does hide a fair bit of this as well. But for now, I'll just get into sanding it. And you can probably see better on the black where I've feathered around where the paint's starting to corrode and chip off. I'll work that a little bit more, but pay particular attention to these hinge points. Make sure there's no grease or anything on them. Give them a really good sand because you want to make sure the paint bonds onto this as much as you can. And obviously with the base, it's a little bit more tricky and complicated. This is why we go through the cleaning process. You want to make sure that there's no grease or oil on any of these standoffs, anything like that. And otherwise, it's just a case of sanding it all down. So these are all sanded down now. I had to quickly move into the shed because that cold change came through. There was stuff blowing everywhere. We had a bit of rain, but it's still really, really hot in here. So this will work quite well. But you essentially, from this point on, you want to make sure that you've gotten all the little nicks feathered out. So you can see on here, we've feathered all this out. I've given underneath around the flange a bit of a sand and gotten rid of all the little marks where it was sort of starting to craze and carry on. And while I haven't stripped it right back, I think that will be fine for the purpose of what we're doing here. I've also gone around and I used isopropyl because I found out I haven't got any Prepsol, but I've gone through and used isopropyl to clean the inside of the flange here so that we can set it down on top of our makeshift spray booth sort of area here. So I've got some sawhorses, I've got some bits of timber left over from where we cut all our fence posts off, and that will allow me to spray the top and get in underneath with the spray can to spray the underside of this flange. Now with the base, I've generally, as I said, focused on the front. It's all ready to go. I paid attention around all these standoffs where all the inlets go in, particularly around the bottom here where we're sort of going a bit crazy and sort of chipping off and, you know, just where you're cleaning it and giving it a bit of hard time. I have taken that back to bare aluminium. We had a little bit of corrosion around here, which I have sanded back, but I'm not too worried about that. Again, there's been some drips coming down here that had a bit of corrosion on the bottom, so I've sanded them right back and feathered them out. And I think we are generally ready to go now. So it's just a simple case of making sure you get all the dust off pretty much everything. So I've got my little blower we used before. I might actually use this to blow off any dust from the emblem and stuff like that. And a fair bit of dust is coming off it, to be honest. Make sure you haven't got any dust on the surfaces you're painting around. And then you want to get a clean rag and ideally some wax and grease remover, but I'm going to use isopropyl, which is a cleaning alcohol. It should work just as well and give the surface a bit of a spray. I mean, the one good thing about isopropyl alcohol is that it does flash off, which means it evaporates. You want to make sure your surface is completely dry as well. So if you've given it a bit of a hose down, make sure you dry this off really, really well before you paint it. But I'm essentially just going to run over all the surfaces with the isopropyl to make sure I remove any traces of wax or grease or anything from our cleaning process so that it's ready to paint. You want to thoroughly shake the can so it's all mixed up. And then really just follow the instructions. But the critical thing, particularly when we're going back over another painted surface, or even when you're doing it from fresh, is to not go too heavy to start off with. So you just want to do what is called a dust coat initially. So you don't want to cover it all, so it's all black. You just want to put a dust over it, so you're still going to see the colour underneath. So for me, this will be a really good example because you'll see that colour coming through. With the black, you won't notice it quite so much. We'll do probably 3 or 4 coats to actually cover this and have it nicely done with a nice, consistent, even coat over it, rather than one big, thick, heavy coat. That's probably going to fisheye because there might be little bits of grease still on it. And even worse, you'll get runs on it and it just won't look quite as professionally finished. So you just want to go around really gently and just dust on a bit of colour. And this will help with paint adhesion for the next few coats that we do after this. Okay, bit of an update. There was something certainly wrong with that first can I was using. Luckily Bunnings is just down the road, so I headed back down. Fortunately, they only had 1 can of black, but I found that you'll generally use 1 can of spray paint per top or bottom. So if you're doing 2, it's best to get 2 cans of spray paint. I sort of wasted a bit of black, so I ended up sort of getting a little bit short on the bottom, but the bottom's done in black. And then because I only have 1 can of black in stock, I've actually swapped over to this metallic charcoal. Still the White Knights heatproof brand, and that was my second choice. So I'm pretty happy with that. I've just got to do a final coat now, and you do need to do a bit of a wet coat I've found using the black. So at the moment I've just been dusting it on, but I'm going to go back over with my final coat as a full wet pass cover coat. And by that, I mean you're actually lapping over where you're working. So I'll show you quickly now. So we're going to come over and do a real good cover coat so that you haven't got any gaps. So you're actually covering the wet as you go up. So I'm going to do that around the whole rest of the top now. That should get it finished off really, really nice. Should definitely wear a respirator. I should have one here inside the shed. If you're doing it outside, it's not so bad. And it's quite tacky on the floor, so it's a real sticky paint to put on. But let's get this finished and see how it turns out. Now that was a very interesting process. I let it all sit inside the shed overnight. We had a nice sunny day yesterday, so I had them sitting out in the sun and they've come up pretty well, I would have to say. The base, I'm really happy with how the black came up, and to be honest, I really wish there were more tins of black and I could have done the lid in black as well, because the black actually sets and dries really, really nice and flat. It looks fantastic, and I think it actually rejuvenates the base of this barbecue really, really well. The metallic charcoal, it came up fairly good as well, but it's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's got a bit more of a drier sort of finish on the top of it. I'm going to put it together like this. I've got a few little marks here and there from where I was trying to get a bit of dust off it. But if we sit the two together, it actually looks really smart, and it's a huge improvement over the old cream or beige lid that we had before. Now the one last step, even though I've had this sitting out in the sun and sort of baking and curing, is to, once we've got all this together, is just bring the heat up in the barbecue really, really slowly to get a few heat cycles through the paint finishes on both the bottom and the lid of the barbecue itself. You don't want to get it too hot. You want to keep it under 100 degrees if you can, but you just want to cycle it through so that it can actually bake and cure onto the shell of the barbecue itself. That'll make a really big difference in how this performs over the long term, and it will just allow it to harden up a little bit and bond and bake onto the surface of the lid in particular, but also the base. So what we'll do now is we'll go through the assembly process. And this is pretty much exactly the same as how we pulled it apart. We just pretty much do everything in reverse. So let's go over to all the little bits that we prepped before with all our plastic rejuvenation, and we'll start putting this all back together, and we'll see how it looks in its new form. So for those that skip past the painting process, we're now at the point where we're putting everything all back together. We've got our little containers full of spare parts. I've gone through and cleaned up whatever I can. However, I'll probably still have to do a few little touch-ups while we're putting this all back together. I'm not going to show you the whole process because it's simply just screwing everything all back together, but there's a few little bits and pieces that I'll cover as we're going. The first is obviously that one thing that I noticed while I was cleaning up all these plastics is that I'm missing a few of the rubber feet off the bottom of our main frame sections here. The good thing about Weber barbecues is that you can buy pretty much everything in spare parts directly from Weber themselves. So I'm going to order a few of these little rubber feet so we can put it all back together. Sits all nice and level on the new outdoor kitchen we're building. But the first thing I'm going to do is actually screw the control knob back onto our front frame so we can start assembling it all back together. And now I haven't actually gone to the effort of respraying the heads of all the screws and bolts and stuff like that. But if you wanted to, you can always put them into some polystyrene, run some black spray paint over, and that'll refresh them good as new. The only thing is you'll probably chip a bit of the finish off while you're screwing everything back together. So for now, I've just given them a clean, but we're going to reinstall them exactly how they are. I will actually go through and actually select the bolts which are slightly better to put on the front, and then the daggy ones can go on the back. Now, if you've got all these loose bushings, these taller ones, they actually go onto the handle that goes onto the lid, and the little shorter ones, they actually go into the bottom here. So they just clip on onto the bottom of the frame, and that's what spaces these legs out from the standoffs on the bottom of the base. So it's just a case of getting the bottom bolt started, then getting your T30, or I actually found one that goes on my socket, and doing it all back up. Flip it around and put the back legs on, and that will make it a lot easier to do the rest of the assembly. Now what we're going to do is actually put the burner in, connect everything up, and then we'll go about putting the handles and the shells back on. So I'm just going to turn it around, and we get our igniter and slide that through the hole like what we did to start off with. Then we get our push button control and slide that in from behind. And it should just click into place. Then we've got to connect the black and white wires up. It's just a simple case of plugging them into the terminals on the back of the igniter. Then we can put our push button start back in. It's a good idea to change the AAA battery while we're at it. And now we can slot the burner into place. Just simply slide it through the hole. And then we've got our bolt that secures the burner into place. You can simply put that into place with a 3/8 socket or a flat blade screwdriver, exactly the same as how we pulled it apart. Now I did clean this up a little bit. If you wanted to, you could actually probably run a wire wheel around it, but at the end of the day, we're not winning any shows here, so I've just kept it as clean as I can, but we're going to put it back together. Now we pop our shells in. They go into the higher points at the top of the frame. They simply just clip in. Just lay them over like that. Now we can put our grab handles on. They go underneath. And the final two bolts go in. Now with the plastic, make sure you're not cross-threading the bolts through. Otherwise, it's going to make it hard to pull it apart again, and you're going to eventually destroy the inside of the plastic here. So just be gentle, don't force it in. If it's going in a little bit crooked, pull it out and have another go. And just like that, the bottom side is pretty much done. Now we'll flip it around, put the lid on, put the handle on, the thermostat in, and we're pretty much ready to put the grills inside and do a test burn. Be a little bit gentle with the freshly painted lid until you get a chance to fully cure it. I cleaned the pins up with some steel wool and some Jif, and that actually made a fairly big difference. But you essentially just slide them into place, pop on the R-clips, install the thermometer if you have one, and again I've just cleaned the probe and the wing nut with some Jif and steel wool just to give it a nice polished look and get rid of any tarnish off it. And then the last thing to do is to put on the handle. Now, interestingly, the handles are the same between the Q and the BBQ. That's pretty much anything that I can see that interchanges, but you'll have these larger bushes that go on the back of the handle, just like so, and that is what spaces it off the lid itself. So make sure you put these in. If you're wondering what they're for, we'll screw it into place and then we're pretty much done. Then popping the lid down, what a transformation that makes. It looks brand new, literally. The colour's all changed, the plastic's all renewed, and it is spotless and clean inside, pretty much ready to do your first cook with your rejuvenated barbecue. And now to season this lid, all you want to do is actually turn the barbecue on. I haven't actually run this barbecue ever. I bought it and then pull it apart straight away. So I'm going to turn it on. And it seems to work pretty well, so that's a good start. Now I'm going to put it on low heat, put the lid down, and we just want to run it up to around about 100 degrees. You don't want to go too far beyond that, and just do a few heat cycles just to bake this paint in. This paint's been on for about a week now, and it's been incredibly hot, so I'm assuming it's fairly well cured by this point. But if you're doing it over a weekend or something like that, you would simply put this all back together, put the lid on, and then just get it up to temperature. Sort of try to hold it around that 100 degrees if you need to, just for a little while, just to help bake it and get that heat into the shell, and then turn it off and let it cool down. You might want to do that again just to make sure that it's fully cured onto the actual shell of the barbecue itself, and then it should be ready to use really. And from there, I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out. Now that we've got our outdoor kitchen set up, which will be the next episode, I think this colour actually works extremely well. It ties it in and it does break up the black on the top of this kitchenette quite well. So you'll see that in the next episode. We're actually installing an IKEA kitchen. It's something new from IKEA and I couldn't find anything on it, so I thought I'd make a bit of a video on it, but that gives a bit of a budget DIY option for an outdoor kitchen as well. It's not 100% complete. I really want to do something with this wall, but you'll see in the next episode it's pretty easy to put together, and it's quite a functional thing because we now have a sink and a tap over on this side. I've got somewhere for our pizza oven on the other, got a bit of storage, got a bar fridge under here, and it's working really, really well. But I've now assembled our BBQ, and while it didn't look terrible before, it does look nice with the restored plastic. It's all nice, black and shiny, and then if you open it up, I do have to say the wire wheel look inside does look pretty fresh. And going through the before and afters, you can really see the difference that this rejuvenation process has made to these two barbecues. The before and afters, as you can see here, are quite incredible. And this is very similar to the bathrooms that I restore as well. You're doing it, and you're like, I don't know, does it look any different? But when you look at what it was before to how it is now with both these barbecues, and that will keep these running for quite a while now. We'll keep up with wiping them down after every single cook and keep them all nice, clean, and respectable. But anyway, that is essentially the process of how you might go about rejuvenating or restoring a Weber barbecue. But I'm still using the butane cookers, and I've got a few modifications to make to our single butanes to actually use them for roasting as well that I haven't quite got to yet. So that's a project for next year, and to show you how adaptable some of these cooking things can really be. And once the larger Q over there has cured, I think we'll do a little bit of cooking on it tonight, cook up some steaks and see how that goes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We've got heaps of really cool content coming in 2025. Anything to do with accessories for the great outdoors. We're building a basic DIY camper, basically converting a soft floor camper. We've got our Jayco Swan we need to finish off a few projects on. We've got our journey over the other side, and we'll mix in a few trips along the way, as well as a range of content as well. So there's lots going on, and I like to add in all the little detail, things that work, that didn't work, and everything that I've researched and learned along the way. And it's great to hear that these videos are helping everyone out in the community. I'm learning as much as you are while we're doing these videos, and I think it's a really, really good thing. So anyway, I thank you all for watching, and as I always say, get out there, stay safe, have fun, and we'll catch you next time.